Okay, this is going to be a super fun video. We have a Rush moving pictures cassette tape here, and even if you're not a Rush fan, I think you'll find this interesting because this particular tape has some serious damage to it, and I'm going to show you how we go about fixing something like this. And you can look right here and see what happened to this tape. You'll see that the tape has come off of the reel and has gone in front of this little slip sheet gasket thing, and it's unplayable right now, obviously, because of that. And so I thought it'd be fun for us to show you, when we get a cassette tape in the studio that's like this, how we get it repaired. And of course, that's what we do here at the studio. We actually have the company Audio Mover. We convert old audio and videotapes to digital. So we do these things by the thousand. And of course, when you get tapes sent in, there's a certain percentage of them that are broken that have to be taken care of. You've got to do repairs on them. Now we don't digitize this kind of tape because they're copyrighted. But we get tapes shipped in from all over the country, from churches and government agencies and families, people, whatever. And then we frequently find ourselves having to do some pretty common repairs. Now this one's a little unusual. We don't see this happen very often. I was just at a record store not long ago and just was flipping through things and saw this because I love Rush. And I pulled it out just to look at it and I go, oh, this would be a great one to make a video about because it's all broken. And so I bought it and then just brought it back here to the studio so you could kind of see how we go about doing this. Hey, hold on for just a second. We'll get right back to the video. But if you like this stuff, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave any comments. We'd love to hear from you, and we really, really appreciate it. Anyway, with that, back to the video. This album, by the way, this came out, I don't know, when did this album come out? 81. I think 12 years old when this came out. So I was just barely kind of becoming aware. And I remember this is really the first time I knew who Rush was because I had some teenage friends, people that I knew, and I'd start seeing the Rush shirts at school. And I remember when they toured through Denver on this one, and then that's when everybody's listening to Tom Sawyer and Red Barchetta, and I remember hearing those songs. So Tom Sawyer, Red Barchetta, YYZ, and Limelight. I mean, that whole side of that tape. It's just and these songs obviously like Witch Hunt. I mean, were great, but this side, if there was a side of a Rush album that just captured everything magnificent about this band, that was it. And a lot of people kind of see this as maybe the Rush touchstone, but the first Rush album that I bought, and I still have it in the other room, vinyl, out in the front of the studio, was 2112. And I don't know, for that, and that one, if you know the Rush story, that one is really where they took their risks and they put them on the map. I mean, that's what solidified them as a force to be reckoned with. And I've seen them in concert a bunch of times. I was too young, I didn't see them on this one, but I saw them a couple others. As a matter of fact, I took my son and we went to the R40 tour, and I don't know that, I think a lot of us suspected that was going to be their last tour. They didn't really announce it, but it of course ended up being their last tour. And it was just as they did that thing where they kind of went from the modern time and rewound backwards. Anyway, what a great band, cool guys. And because I'm kind of I didn't even think about this, but I'm wearing a Kiss shirt. I'm a Kiss fan, and Kiss, on one of their first tours, took them out on tour. They helped get Rush on the map in some ways. So anyway, talk about different, type of bands and different kinds of music. So here we have this issue. And if you owned a tape like this and you had a problem like this, I just wanted to show you how you do it. Now the first problem you have with a lot of these tapes that were produced by record companies that you'd buy at the store that had songs already recorded on them was they were sealed shut. This one has a little bit of a crack right there. But you can see that it's sealed shut. Where a lot of tapes that you would buy to record on, for example, like this Maxell, has screws, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws. And a lot of the tapes that get sent into the studio here that we digitize are like this. So if we have a broken issue like this, then it's really a simple matter of grabbing a little, just a little screwdriver like this, opening it up, lifting the shell off, and then getting into it. But we do get a lot of tapes. There are a lot of manufactured tapes, blank tapes, that were sealed shut. And so then we find ourselves on a fairly regular basis needing to do what I'm about to show you. And you get mixed results. The nice thing about this is the tape inside, so long as we don't destroy it with a screwdriver, which we're pretty careful about, and even if you hit it, this stuff's very, very robust, and it's really hard to do serious damage to it when we're opening these things up. You literally could, even if we destroy, because sometimes you do. You're opening this up, cracking it open, it just breaks in pieces to get it all off. Doesn't matter, because we can take the tapes out and put it in a new housing like this, and you'll never know the difference. And we actually end up doing that periodically. And we have boxes and boxes of empty cases where we've removed them just for that purpose, because some of our clients will get things sent in, again, from government agencies and churches that send in thousands and thousands of tapes, and they don't necessarily want them back. They'll tell us ahead of time, hey, just throw them away for us. We'll always ship your things back to you. But a lot of times they just don't. They're like, what are we going to do with them? You digitize them, we're just going to throw them away once they get back here. So what we'll do is we'll scavenge. And so we'll take a bunch of the tapes that they'll leave behind. They'll say, just keep them. And we'll take all the tape out of it, throw that away, and then we'll keep the pressure pad, we'll keep the reels, we'll keep the housing, so that other people like you, if you send something in and it's broken and we have to tear it apart, we just take the tape out, put it in a new housing, and it works fine. So anyway, that's kind of a nice thing to know. But as I said, this one doesn't have screws, so there's not a lot of, you don't have a lot of options other than to just crack it open and try to muscle it apart. The tapes were sealed. You can see the seal right there, right there, going around, and it just kind of glued together. The seal continues on the inside there, and that one, most of the time in my experience, is not glued together, but it's also very thin and it's very easy to break. So usually where we start with this is we use these two holes right there and right there to get started on cracking it open. Now, for those of you that don't know what it is, you'll see the different. Oh, this one actually has them broken out. Let me see if this one does. Oh, they all do. I thought maybe we'd have some tapes that. Okay, here you can see an example. Here you'll see that this tape has that little that piece of plastic, and then here it's a hole. And what's the difference there? This is a record protect tab. And what that means is, with that there, inside every tape deck, there is a little, this is one of our tone tapes. It's just for working on the tape decks to make sure the timing's right, that kind of thing. That's why that says that there. So the way it works, when you put a tape in a tape deck, let's say you put it in and then it goes up into place, there's a little, kind of like a button. And as the tape closes, this thing goes up on top and it sits like so. And that signals, when that is right there like so, that signals the tape deck to disable the record head, because you could record over tapes. This is one of the things that made cassette tapes nice, is you could record on them. When you break that out, like we did here, when you close the tape, that button will fall in that hole, will go in that hole like this, and then, that, I just got it backwards. This signals that you can record because the button didn't go down. I said it backwards, so bear with me here. So that now, as long as that button's there, you'll be able to record over this tape. If you break it out, then that sinks in, and then now you won't be able to record. And that's what is going on here with this rush tape. That's why you have these spots. That little button pops in, and then it signals the tape deck, do not record on this tape. And then and every time you bought a tape that was manufactured by a record company, that's what you'd get. They'd have these already broken out. So that for you, if you recorded something on a tape and you didn't want to lose it, then you would break those little tabs out, then nobody could record over it. and then until you could just take a little piece of tape and put it over the top, like Scotch tape, something like that, and then you could record over it again. So you could record over this tape. All you'd have to do is put something over the top of that, and then you could record over it. Anyway, so what we're going to do, we're going to go through the process of busting this open now and showing you how we would fix this. Now, the first thing to notice that you might find interesting before we open it, because you won't be able to see it as well then, is that you'll see that it's going in front of, you don't see the reel. I mean, you can kind of see the reel right there, but you don't see it there. This here it's kind of a gasket. I think some people, I've heard it called a slip sheet, that sits right in between the tape itself on the spool and the plastic case, so that it's not rubbing on the plastic shell. And it's this very, very thin piece of, I don't know what they make it out of. And you can see it has this little embossing that I'll show you in a second. But for some reason, it got twisted and wrapped around that little gasket that sits in there, that slip sheet. And then when we open it up, we're going to have to pull that out and then get it back on the reel. And I don't know what other problems might be going on in there, because you can't really see it through that slip sheet. And all cassette tapes have this little gasket, and you'll see there's one on this side too. And if you removed that, you wouldn't be able to read this very well, because this is printed literally on a clear piece of plastic. The white is, and it would become very hard to read. So it really is a matter of muscling this apart. So the place we start, it looks like it's cracked in a couple of spots. The first thing we do is see if we can just crack it a little bit to break the seal. And you can hear it, just to get it, oh, there we go. Oh, that wasn't good. We may have to replace this whole thing when it's all said and done. Anyway, but you're seeing real life, some of the things that we deal with. A lot of times what we'll do is very lightly, try to crack it, because then if you can get this to start cracking the seams, it makes it a little easier to wedge it open. Right there, what I did is actually, it was very weak in that spot. But you'll see, though, that it did crack along the seam. And this will actually be fairly, and believe it or not, that's not a big deal. You see how I just got it to snap back shut, even though it's not supposed to be like that. So far as as long as we don't do more damage to it, this tape will work fine. Still, even in this housing. And I don't know if I said this already, because I've said this in other videos, but we can, worst case scenario, if we destroy it, we can put it in another housing. So it's smart to use a screwdriver that isn't magnetized. I'm not as worried about it in this case, because we're never going to play this tape. We've got the record in the other room, and I bought this just for this purpose. But if you're doing this on a tape that's important to you, you don't want to use screwdrivers that are magnetic. I think, I'm pretty sure this one's magnetic. But we do have some to pick up screws, but you don't want to use one that's magnetic when you get really close to the tape, because theoretically, because this is iron oxide, ferric oxide, and it's all this audio on there is magnetic, you can theoretically damage the audio by getting a magnet too close to it. If we had a strong enough magnet over this right now, it would just destroy all the audio on there. So anyway, what we're going to do now is start wedging this open. Oh, this actually is going to come apart pretty easily. At least it seems like it, because that seam broke pretty clean. There you go. So now we're going to break it along this side. And trying to avoid the tape on the inside, so we don't, although it's very robust, it's hard to do too much damage to it. Like I said, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've seen how robust this stuff actually is when you get down to it. I'm trying not to, you can see the tape right there, and I'm trying not to get on it too much, but sometimes it's kind of unavoidable touching it a little bit. And like I said, for the most part, it won't damage it that much. So now we've got this seal kind of broken. And like I said, I'm trying not to, you can see that how it's cracking right. That's going to be a problem right there. And that may stop us from putting it back in the same housing. And again, in this case, I'm not too worried about it because it's not as if we're going to play this tape again. There you go. So we just cracked that. And boy, I loved Rush so much. It was funny because I took my son, who's obviously much younger than I am, to see them on that last tour, and it was funny to see him just kind of get it a little bit. What was, because they were kind of, even though they were an enormously famous band, they still had, in some ways, kind of a cult following. This is, like I said, I'm doing my best not to do damage to, there we go, not to do damage to the tape, and sometimes you end up breaking things. This, believe it or not, I think we'd even be able to salvage this. And it doesn't look pretty, but there we go, we got it apart. Now, this is actually going to be really easy to put back together. Okay. While I was moving it around, this reel came off of the thing. That's why that looks like that. And that's going to be really easy to take care of. Now, you can see that this was kind of twisted around in here. You can see that somehow there's a fold right there. I don't know how it got in this state, how it got twisted around, but you can see right here how the tape is going behind that little thing right there. And here's a good thing where you can see what that looks like. That's this little slip sheet or this little gasket. And like I said, if you put this against white, that becomes impossible to read. That this thing plays a role in keeping it, in even just making the text visible. So anyway, and you'll see that it's a little bit embossed right there and right there. And so not only does it keep it from rubbing on the shell, but this little embossing on the top and bottom, and tapes are so different. We have other videos where I show it to you. Sometimes there are little circles and a lot of other variations. It plays a simple role of, in some ways, it's supposed to prevent what just happened. It's supposed to help it spool up onto the reel very smoothly by just putting this. It's very, very slippery, there's very low friction so that it moves around it smoothly. And it's also then supposed to, if you think of this sitting up, very lightly push in on both sides so that it spools up nicely. But in this case, something went terribly wrong. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this out, set it over there on the side. Hope you can see that in the camera. Move that back in place, yeah. And then I'm just going to take this one and I'm going to lift it up, and you're going to see, I have no idea how that would have happened. But we're just going to kind of pull it out. There you go. And you'll see that, yeah, somehow that might have been me right there that caused that with the screwdriver. So there is a tiny little bit of damage right there. I think that was probably from the screwdriver, although I'm not 100% sure because of how this got all twisted around in there. But I think that was our damage. We try not to do that, but sometimes, again, you're getting the screwdriver in there and trying to break it. And I've tried doing this so many different ways where where we've got little tools that we try to cut through the seam, and man, there's just no real great way of doing this. Okay, anyway, that's it. So it's pretty simple. Now we take this spool, and it just sets back, in place like so. And then this one we're gonna have to work with just a little bit because it's twisted now, and it came off of the spool a little bit. Fortunately, it's near the beginning. Yeah, that's interesting because it's a little bent. Just makes me wonder what happened when they were. What I'm going to do here to make this easy. See, what happens is you start working with it. This can get maddening. When you're working with the actual oxide, it gets very flippy. And so you end up kind of winding it by hand and then holding it in place the best you can to get it to wind back on. Now it's twisted, so now we have to figure out to make sure that we don't flip it over. Okay, this is going to get maddening here in just a second. I'm going to try to pull it tight on this reel. I could pretty easily. By the way, when you do this, wash your hands really well. I've tried doing this with gloves and things, and it's just not practical. So wash your hands so you don't get oils and things on them, because you end up, unfortunately, touching it while you're working with it. And there's just not a lot you can do about that. And like I said, this stuff's very robust. I've been doing this for a long time. Even tape that gets damaged a little bit, sometimes you can't even tell. So, and a lot of the stuff that we get in here is not music. Like we rarely do any music, because most people, the stuff that they send in is, I shouldn't say that. Most of the stuff we get sent in is speaking, church sermons, government meetings, city council, that kind of stuff. But we do get a lot of people that have grandma playing the piano and singing and that kind of thing. But that little blip in that one spot, I don't think you probably wouldn't even notice it as you're listening, because it goes by so fast. And even some of these folds that were just in there from the damage that happened when it got twisted or whatever happened, really won't be a big deal. And I'll actually show you why in just a second. So that's kind of putting it on there kind of straight. And then what I'm going to do is we're just going to kind of get this set back on, so that now, and we're going to try to move it back in place without it flipping around. So I'm going to kind of hold it and just move this stuff kind of out into its close to proper location. Now you'll notice in this case, these wheels, there's a wheel right there, and there's a wheel that's supposed to go right there, and it fell off while we were opening it. There's a little metal post that it sits on. Gotta find my tweezers. Just gonna move this out of the way just a little bit, right there, okay. Now that little wheel just sits right there. And the little metal, if you look at this side, you'll see that there's just a little hole right there and right there. And then the same thing is on this side. And then when it closes together, sometimes if it moves slightly, it's hard and it won't line up very well as you put it back together, but not usually. Usually it's pretty easy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of pull that a little tight. Then we're going to pull this tight over there, and we're just going to make sure that it goes through the path that it's supposed to follow. So the path that follows in this particular housing, we have other videos where it's a little different. You'll see the tape goes like this. It goes around a post that's right there. Little plastic post. It goes around this wheel that spins freely, and then it kind of goes through here in front of this pressure pad, there across that over on the other reel. The most common problem with tapes like this is not what we just saw. That's actually, seeing it get wrapped around there is pretty weird, honestly. This is what normally goes wrong. This little pad is stuck to that mount, that little copper mount. Basically, it's glued on there. And the purpose that it serves, if you've never seen this before, whenever you're listening to a tape, and the tape is moving through the shell, through the housing like this. Yeah, there was some tape broke a little bit more, or the shell broke a little more than I thought it did. Should still work though. When the tape plays, oh goodness. Go ahead while we're waiting and type in your favorite thing about Rush in the comments. If you're a Rush fan, I loved them. Okay, now everything's in place. All right. So the purpose for that pad is that when you would hit play and it's going from one side to the other, there's a head in your tape deck that's shaped kind of like that, and when you'd hit play, it would push up and touch the tape like that while it's moving. And that little pad on that little mount gives it a nice solid connection because the audio signal, the magnetic signal is on this side. And so when it goes up and touches it, that gives it a nice solid connection. So even in those cases where there's a little fold or even just a little damage, it goes by so fast and it's held in place so tightly, most of the time you won't even pick it up. Or if you do, it's so fast that you don't really realize that there was something wrong with the tape. It's possible when you listen back to this that you would hear that just a little garbled. When I say garbled, it'll just like kind of get quieter just for that fast or something. It's really not that big a deal. And especially most of the stuff that we get, which is just speaking, you'd never notice it anyway. That small little ding. And like I said, we try to avoid that, but if we can, before we fix a tape, we'll actually rewind it all the way to the beginning so that the only tape that's really exposed is the leader tape. And I'm going to just forward this so you can kind of see. So you can see how that spins. That one spins. This one's spinning too. And then that's how the whole thing works on the inside. And then you can imagine the tape head goes like that while it's playing. And then I'm not going to do it because it'll give it too much pressure. And then that's what's getting the sound is going right there. And we're going to do a whole nother video on this at some time later, because you'll notice, if you understand geometry and geometry, you'd notice that one reel right now is spinning faster than the other one as I do this. And the reason that is because if you understand the geometry of it, this one you're on a bigger wheel than that one by virtue of the amount of tape that's on it. And so this one's moving a lot faster than that one. And if you watch a tape deck, if you're watching a tape play in a tape deck, you'll notice that one side slows down while the other side is speeding up. And then you start thinking to yourself, how in the world does a tape deck know how to do that? And what's really interesting, we'll do a whole nother video to explain what's going on, why one reel goes faster than the other. Because if you think about it, this one's constantly decelerating and this one's constantly accelerating. It's never, these reels on these cassette decks, these cassette tapes are never going a constant speed. They are always either accelerating or decelerating because this wheel is getting bigger and smaller constantly. So it's never going so these wheels, the reels never go a consistent speed ever. Okay, so watch. So now we're getting, and we'll do a whole nother video explaining all that. It's pretty interesting how it works and how they manage to do it. So now you'll see the leader tape, which is this light blue tape, and you can't record on that. And like I said, normally what we try to do, if we have to open up a tape, is to get it all the way to the beginning like that so that there's little damage, little chance. Like if I'm jamming the screwdriver right in there, I'm damaging the leader tape, which makes no difference at all. Doesn't impact the sound even a tiny bit because you can't record on it. So you'll see there, now we're all the way to the beginning or the end of this side. And you'll kind of see how this works. The leader tape, I'll pull this out so you can see it, is that blue clear tape. You'll see, this is a great example, you'll see how it's attached to the reel. In the reel, there's just kind of a little hole, and then they take this white, I don't know what we call that, post. They stick the tape in there and then jam that little post in the hole, and then that holds it in place. That's why it's not coming. That's how it sticks to the reel. And every cassette tape you own has a variation of that. Some of them are, this was the best design in my opinion. Some of them had a much bigger piece that would go right there, and then over time those would literally break, and then the tape just, we've had a ton of those. And like I said, we have pieces so we can fix any of this that comes in. I don't think we're going to need to put this in a new housing. I think it'll sit fine in here, but you could see how easy it is. You could just pick this up, put it in a new housing, and you'd never know the difference. It would play fine, other than it would look different. You wouldn't see all this stuff on it. So if that ever happens where where the tape becomes so damaged that we can't put it back together, we'll basically put it in the new housing, take the old shell and just rubber band it to this, and then you'll have it. And again, most of the stuff that gets sent into us, though, it's the last time the tape's ever going to get played because we're digitizing it, and then they can, then again, a lot of people will get them back and then they'll just throw them away, or they'll tell us to keep them. Again, though, if you're thinking about sending stuff into the studio, audiomover.com, we always send everything back to you unless you tell us not to. You'll always get it back. So, but this gives you kind of an idea of the kind of stuff that we have to go through sometimes. And you'll see this was sealed. You'll see a couple of different spots. Like normally there's a screw right there. You'll see the other tape that I gave you the example of. There'll be a screw right in that spot. In this case, they actually just glue that thing together. And, oh yeah, so anyway, so then there's the leader. And we have to do this kind of thing, again, fairly frequently. And this one was a little weird, but this gives you an idea of the kind of stuff that we have to go through to get a tape to work. I don't think we've ever had a tape that we couldn't get to ultimately work. Somehow we'll get the things to function. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it back on top. Just make sure don't have any other little pieces of plastic floating around in there from breaking it apart. Looks pretty good. So let's see if we can get this to go back on. Most of the time they basically almost fall in place, but this one, because we had to beat it up a little bit, may not fall in place quite as well. The big thing, like I said, and sometimes ends up being those little posts getting them, but those are lining up fine. It looks like our problem is going to be that thing in the middle. Doesn't like it. Yeah, the top actually got put back on just fine. Let's see if we can get that middle thing to line up. There we go. And then we have to make sure that the leader tape goes behind the little tabs. Right there. Looks like all that's in line. There you go. And you'll hear it kind of snap in place. It's a little beat up, but honestly, it doesn't. I mean, funny thing, it had that crack before we opened it. It was probably part of the reason it broke the way it did. It had that little crack before we opened it, so it was already beat up a little bit. And amazingly enough, this tape, I will take a different kind of tape, like this, put it on here, like so, rather than gluing it back together. We don't need to do that. Put that on that side. And that tape now, you can put it in your car or put it in your tape deck or whatever, if you have a tape deck to put it in, and it'll work fine. And anyway, that's how you would, and you can see right here, we can spin it, put it in a tape deck, and it'll work perfectly normally. Like any other, yeah. Just looking at it, looked like I saw something shine in there. No, it's working just fine. Oh, here's what's going on. You'll see that I have to fix one little thing right there. And this is one of the challenges with putting these things back together, is that these posts you'll see that they're supposed to go behind these little things. Sometimes when you're putting them back together, if it's not completely in, it'll pull itself out. So I'm just going to take this piece of tape off. You got a little bonus repair. If you've actually stuck through this whole thing, be sure and like and subscribe to our channel. I don't know how I managed to get that tape on there like that. Okay, so I'll show you how to deal with this. Because this is a thing, and this gets really hard. Again, it's easier if you're dealing with the leader, because the leader's doesn't flip and flop around as much, but it's also a little harder to see. I thought it was behind it, but it wasn't. So I'm going to kind of lift that up, and we're going to see if we can just work that in. Going to have to open it up a little bit more, I fear. There we go. It's kind of an illusion because it's clear and it's hard to see it. That's how I missed it the first time. Goodness gracious, now it's all kind of stuck in there. Like I said, sometimes this can get a little bit maddening doing this. Okay, there we go. Now we got it. Make sure that it's going behind every spot. Yep, okay. Okay, try that again. So now we take our little piece of Scotch tape, put that in, and now we have a perfectly functional Rush moving pictures cassette tape that will work in any tape deck, and you'd be able to play this thing in your car or wherever. You wouldn't have to worry about it. That tape right there on both sides is all you need, and this tape will work just fine. Anyway, that's how we do it. Thanks for taking the time for watching. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you were a Rush fan, if you or if you've ever had to deal with cassette tape things like this, we'd love to hear your comments. And with that, have yourself a fantastic day.